Hello. I haven't made a reading or like what I've read video in a while. I was kind of slowing down on my reading and I decided to just hold off and take the pressure off some and just make a video when I had a good amount of books I had read. And I think that helped, and I did read a good amount more. So here I am ready to share what I read this summer over like the past 3 months from June, July, and August. So we'll start off at the beginning with the Vampire Lestat. I started listening to the Vampire Lestat in like June. I decided to read it as part of my preparation for going to New Orleans. And I haven't read Interview with a Vampire, but I'd seen the movie a couple of times and I did a little bit of Googling, and it seemed like they were pretty similar, that I could jump into the Vampire Lestat. I wanted something, new. It was a long read. I think it was audiobook though, so it was like 21 hours, I think. And I do have to say, I have some mixed feelings about it. Alright, so I'm going to read the summary for the Vampire Lestat. Once an aristocrat in the heady days of pre-revolutionary France, now Lestat is a rock star in the demonic, shimmering 1980s. He rushes through the centuries in search of others like him, seeking answers to the mystery of his terrifying existence. His story, the second volume in Anne Rice's best-selling Vampire Chronicles, is mesmerizing, passionate, and thrilling. So that was the pitch there. I enjoyed the part in the 1980s too with the rock band, like that was fun, but that was really just like the beginning of it, and then it turned into Lestat's origin story, which I kind of expected. It just seemed to go on forever. I did really enjoy like the beginning of it, where it started with he was human and like the people in his life and coming to terms with being a vampire. All of that was super interesting and yeah, like great. Like the world building was fun, the details were great. It had like great vampire creepy stuff that you want, and it was like Rococo era France, so that was cool. Towards like the second half of the book though, I would say like the second half of like Lestat's musings about his journey, it just got like really slow, and I had to start like really fighting through it. He's like trying to learn more about being a vampire, I guess, and find more vampires like him out there, but then like as he meets other people, then they will go into the entire life story of themselves. So within an origin story, we get like other vampires' origin stories that would last like full hours. I would like lose track of where I was in time, what was going on, who was talking, because it would just go on for so long. And that was painful. Like, it was interesting. It was just like the fatigue was too much and it got to me. And then finally, the end of the story it did like pick back and get to real time, and that was interesting. It just took quite a while to get there. So, and I think another thing that was off-putting about it was that I don't feel like the summary really represented what the book was about as much. The first sentence is that he was an aristocrat in France, but now he's like a rock star in the shimmering 1980s. And that's what I was really drawn in by, and you really don't get to see that much at all. Almost all of it is spent on like his origin story and other characters' origin stories. So I was just kind of disappointed, and I just like kept waiting to get to like this like big he's a rock star moment and things, and it just like never seemed to happen. I was like, oh, I guess it happens in like the third book more. It was, so that was frustrating, especially when you're like, 21 hours in, you're like waiting for something, and then it's just like it doesn't actually happen. What you're expecting to happen didn't happen. It's gonna be in the next book. I gave the Vampire Lestat 3 stars. It's definitely, it's not like a fun, digestible read. No one claimed it was. So I can't hold that too hard against it, and there definitely were things I enjoyed. I just wish it was shorter. I wish there is an abridged version. I would like recommend an abridged version if you were going to read it though. It's like twice as long as the Interview with a Vampire is, like the book. Yeah. Next, after that I felt a little worn out. a little tired. I was planning on reading the third book because after all, that's where I felt like what I signed on for with the Vampire Lestat was. Like, that was the plot I was actually looking for, maybe. But I felt tired. And the next book was also long. And I decided to take a break and reread some things. I've been wanting to reread Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, so I decided to do that. And then after I read those two, I went ahead, I was so excited, they were so easy and fun, and I loved them so much, I decided to go ahead and jump in onto King of Scars and Rule of Wolves, which is like the Nikolai duology that happens after. Mostly characters from the Shadow and Bone trilogy, but also pulls in characters from the Crows duology. Nikolai is trying to rebuild Ravka after the years of civil war and recovering from that and working with Zoya as well as some other people to kind of restore Ravka to its greatness, or at least survive. And then Rule of Wolves just kind of really continues it. I really enjoyed these books. I didn't read Shadow and Bone, the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and I don't have any plans on it. I wasn't planning on it at all, so I kind of knew that would come into play. Like, I knew there were characters from those books in these books. I didn't expect so much of the plot to actually end up pulling into stuff that happened in Shadow and Bone. I kind of thought, okay, like, that happened, boop, and this is like new stuff just with some characters, but some stuff actually did come back, which I can't really hold that against the book, because just because I wasn't invested in that story doesn't mean people who were invested in that story would probably love that stuff. So wasn't super for me, just wasn't really what I was there for. I didn't want to go back to that, but it was, fine. There were other parts of the story that I really enjoyed. They were new characters for me, like Nikolai and Zoya. They're probably the big main two, and they were in the other books, but they were side characters. They were the supporting roles, and they did make an appearance, a very brief appearance in Crooked Kingdom. So hi besties. They continued being great. I was really invested in them. I was still invested in Nina and the people around her. Something that I got tired of, my critique would be, I got a little tired of the multi-perspective situation. One of the reasons it works so well in Crooked Kingdom, I think, is because you're getting different perspectives on the same story, but everyone's generally together and it's just the same plot. In King of Scars and Rule of Wolves, the perspectives are more separated and there's more parallel plot lines as opposed to one united one that you're getting different perspectives on. So it was really tough, especially because there were some people that came in and out as far as the swapping perspectives, but the three main people who I think were in the entire book were Nina, Zoya, and Nikolai. So we would go through a Zoya and a Nikolai chapter and maybe another person who was all with them. So you'd have 4 chapters before you finally got back to Nina, and that I found that really disorienting. I know there's there's suspense. I started to get really frustrated with the swapping when it was I just got back into Nina's story and I'm really invested in it, and then all of a sudden we're back in the other story and I'm I don't remember what was happening. And I'd get really into the Nikolai and Zoe story and I'd be okay, yeah, then we'd be back in Nina's story and I wouldn't even remember what had been happening. I had completely lost the suspense at that point. Overall, obviously not a major problem, because I did give the books 4 stars. I did like them. I would recommend them, especially if you were really into the Shadow and Bone series. The Crow characters do make solid appearances in them. So I do think it's also worth it if you it's not just Nina, the other people make some good appearances. So I would still recommend it, even if you just read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. Alright, after those, I read Box in the Woods. I read the Box in the Woods. It's the 4th Truly Devious novel or mystery that came out, and it's the first one that's separate from the first 3. So the first 3, all were about the same mystery and just kind of an extension of one another, and they're at the school, Ellingham Academy, over the course of a year. This one is now in the summer, so it's a different setting, a different story, and it is just a one-off mystery. It doesn't continue over multiple books. Alright, so The Box in the Woods, the summary is: amateur sleuth Stevie Bell needs a good murder. After catching a killer at her high school, she's back at home for a normal, and that means boring, summer. But then she gets a message from the owner of Sunny Pines, formerly known as Camp Wonderfalls, the site of the notorious unsolved case, the Box in the Woods murders. Back in 1978, 4 camp counselors were killed in the woods outside of the town of Barlow's Corners, their bodies left in gruesome display. The new owner offers Stevie an invitation: come to the camp and help him work on a true crime podcast about the case. Stevie agrees, as long as she can bring her friends from Ellingham Academy. Nothing sounds better than a summer spent together investigating old murders. But something evil still lurks in Barlow Corners. When Stevie opens the lid on this long dormant case, she gets much more than she bargained for. The Box in the Woods will make room for more victims. This time, Stevie might not make it out alive. I picked this book out because as my travel book for when I was actually going to New Orleans. I ended up reading it all in one day at the airport and on the plane while we were traveling home, and it worked really well for that. It was easy to jump into, to read, not a hard book, definitely very fun. I would say though that the pacing was really off. I think maybe I literally was in the book and I was like, wait, maybe this one does go over multiple books like the others, because that's how confused the pacing was for me. It was all kind of information gathering, and then all of a sudden stuff happened at the end. I was like, boom, there, mystery revealed, and I was like, wait, what? How did we arrive at this moment? Because I wasn't, it felt like there was no rising tension. It felt like it was just ta-da, boop, boop. If I were to make a chart of the plot. So I gave that one 2.5 or 3 stars. Fun and easy read, but I mean I don't know. I guess I'd round it up to 3. It was fun. I enjoyed reading it, but then I was kind of disappointed. So after that, the next book I read, I actually have in physical copy. It is Any Way the Wind Blows, which I believe is low-key a highly anticipated release. I did not realize this was out, and I passed it at Target, and I was like, oh my god, I have to buy it. And then I went home and read it immediately. So I was super excited for this. I also kind of think my eagerness kind of bit me in the butt a little bit, because I didn't prepare or reread the other books first, and I realized while I was reading this one that I definitely forgot important things, and that maybe that was impacting my reading of it. I didn't stop though, and I did definitely enjoy it. I think when I spoke about the second book, one of my major criticisms was that it was obviously one story in a way split into 2, and that was confirmed when I was looking stuff up online, and they said that it was originally supposed to be 1 book, and then they decided to split it into 2 and have 2 additional books. So I kind of understand why they did it, and there is a big divide that separates them, the separating point, but it is it's kind of if you watched Deathly Hallows Part 1, the movie, and they just didn't watch the second movie, you know? You need to watch the second movie. Not that this one is all action, the other is all build up. It's more that one's all emotional tension building, and this one is all emotional release. So on that note, I would say it is definitely a probably super satisfying fan emotion, gratification wise. it does a lot of things that I think people were like hoping for and wanting and craving throughout the first 2 books. And it was definitely I didn't even realize I was reading it so much because I was just like going through it, but afterwards I felt emotionally wiped. I was like, this was so much. I think there was a lot of clever stuff about it that worked. I think there's so many successful things, and I did give it 4 stars. It's not perfect. I have a couple personal gripes with it. One, I'm not going to go into as much because I feel like it's like too spoilery, but the other one I think I can say vaguely enough is that like this book ties up a lot of like loose ends, I think, which would be like really emotionally satisfying for fans and for a conclusion. I feel like one of the loose ends, the way it kind of is tied up at the end was not really earned, and there wasn't really any groundwork laid for it. There was just kind of like a convenient whoops, and now it's tied up, ta-da, kind of a way about it. I also like similar criticism with this one that I had for both King of Scars and Rule of Wolves is just this swapping of perspectives in this one. In my criticism of Rule of Wolves, like I was just saying, or like both of those, was that there was like 2 separate storylines, and that got like disorienting and tiring. This one wasn't quite as disorienting, but it had even more going on. If Rule of Wolves and King of Scars had like an A plot and a B plot, this one had like an A plot and a B plot and a C plot thrown in there, and it was just a lot. This was easier to keep straight, but like I was definitely like, is this really necessary? And it might be for some people, as far as like maybe, yeah, I feel like it's almost was like written as like a love letter to the fans in that way, that it really does like give you everything you could want. I don't think it was as efficient a story though because of it. But 4 stars. Recommend it. I mean, it's always easier to talk more about your criticisms because it takes more to explain, I think. But yeah, definitely really emotionally satisfying in a lot of ways, and I think fans would, really like it. I think so. I liked it. I forgot things from the first 2 books, but I really liked it still. On that note, so after I read this, I went ahead and I reread Carry On, because I was kind of like, oh yeah, I do want to reread this, and I think it would help me kind of back inform what's going on, some stuff going on in here. And while I was reading that, I did see like the way the multiple narrators are used is it's like majorly majority from Simon's point of view, as well as the most of the stories following the same like plot line. And once again, like I think that is just so much easier to read, such as with 6 of Crows, you have 6 different people, but they're all in the same like through line. After I reread Carry On though, I did not continue with Wayward Son. I felt like that would just be too cyclical. Like if I reread Wayward Son, I would have to read Any Way the Wind Blows again, because like I feel like they're 2 halves of a whole. They just need to like be together all the time. Okay, so the next book I finished, which I was actually probably listening to over a longer period of time than some of these books that I read, was The Tenant, which is a like crime drama thriller. So The Tenant is about, it's the book number 1 in like a series that'll be about these like 2 detectives, Korner and Werner, I believe is how it's pronounced. It does take place in Copenhagen. So, some of my pronunciation isn't great. And it was a debut. It's a debut by the author, Kathy Reichs. Pronunciation, once again. But this is about a young woman who is discovered brutally murdered in her own apartment, and an intricate pattern of lines carved into her face. Copenhagen police detectives Jeppe Korner and Annette Werner are assigned to the case. In short order, they establish a link between the victim, Julie Stender, and her landlady, Esther De Laurenti, who's a bit too fond of drink and the host of a raucous dinner parties. and the host of raucous dinner parties with her artist friends. Esther also turns out to be a budding novelist, and when Yulie turns up as the murder victim in a still unfinished mystery she's writing, the link between fiction and real life grows both more urgent and more dangerous. But Esther's role in this twisted scenario is not quite as clear as it first seems. Is she the culprit, or just another victim, trapped in a twisted game of vengeance? Annette and Yeppe must dig more deeply into the two women's past to discover the identity of the brutal puppet master pulling the strings. I think that summary is just kind of the best I can say. It's a really interesting springboard of a plot with some great storytelling in there. If you were into that summary, I think you would enjoy the book. I don't think it was especially the premise was good enough to carry it through. There wasn't anything in particular that I'm like, oh my god, the characters were so good and I really got invested in them and that's why I like it. Or I wouldn't even say, there were twists because it's a thriller, but I wouldn't be like, wow, this is a book that is about the twist. It was a book that was had a really great and interesting premise, and I think fulfilled that great interesting premise. And so I gave it 3 stars. I say I like thriller mysteries a lot, but I feel like I'm always rating them kind of low to average. There are some I just really, really love and I know it, and others it's just kind of really good, but I don't necessarily get as passionate about them. Maybe when I'm in the mood for another crime thriller, I'll pick this one. I'm just not in the mood for a crime thriller right now. So it's good. It's good. Interesting premise. If you like that premise, I think you will like this book. Alright. My lip gloss is literally just running, and I don't know how long it's been like this, and it looks kind of terrifying. Very vampiric though. Now we're on to the big the most of the stuff I've really read. This has been so I listened to Into the Twilight, which is mainly a Twilight podcast. It's really good. I recommend it. But they also read other books, and they read 2 chapters every week, and you can kind of follow along. Or you don't have to. They've read the 50 Shades of Grey series, I think. They read at least one of the U books. They also, most recently, they were starting The Host when I started listening, I think. The latest book that they're reading they chose to do Vampire Academy, which I had never read before, and I didn't even really know what it was about. I think I did, stream the movie at some point, and I didn't think much of it. Never thought of it again, in fact. And I had a couple Audible credits built up, and I was just having trouble finding something I really wanted to read. I was like, hey, I'll listen to this along with them. I think that would be fun. So I started to do that, but then I just didn't want to stop listening, and I got really ahead, and then I finished the book, and then I also finished the next 3 books in the 6-book series so far. And I plan to finish it. It came out in the early 2000s, so right around the same time as Twilight, but I think before the Twilight craze actually started. It is a YA series, and the kind of initial premise is there's Rose, who is a guardian, and she has a special bond, telepathic bond with Lissa, a Moroi, and also vampire royalty. So this is it's kind of hard to explain the intricacies of it. There is a good amount of world building involved with it, and terms jargon in the book. And they go to a vampire academy. Yeah. There's also magic and lots of other fun stuff. There's also some stuff that I'm I don't love, but overall, obviously, I continued reading them. It was just so fun and digestible, and the main character, who you're going from her perspective, Rose Hathaway is just like, has such a strong voice. Not just the audiobook like reader person, but like the character itself. And I really did it. Like, I really enjoyed the characters that have been built up. It's just like, I'm having a great fun time reading them. Are they like the best books? Like, no, but they are like way better than I expected, honestly. In addition to like being really fun, I think that like the characters are really complex and interesting, and I'm invested in a bunch of them. I also think that like the plot has kind of taken me by surprise at multiple times, taken me like off the expected route I thought it would go. It is definitely like, the books have definitely progressed. They aren't just like staying stagnant, kind of like repeating the same thing. Like, it's not like they even necessarily take place over a super long period of time, but they're definitely like maturing, and you can tell like the characters are growing as they go through these things that happen in the events of the series. I think the most like painful thing sometimes is like a lot of any of like the realizations Rose has to make, any of sort of the like mystery elements, is those are sometimes like painfully drawn out. But those usually aren't like major plot points, and I don't really care. It's not keeping me from reading them. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how the last 2 books go. So out of the books so far, I would give Vampire Academy, which is like the first one, but also like the name of the series, like a 3.5. Yeah, like a 3.5, maybe even a 4, just like personally. It's kind of on the cusp there, undecided. Frostbite, I would give a 3. Shadow Kiss is my favorite book so far. I would give that one a 4. I really liked it. And Blood Promise, I would say like maybe a 3.5 or a 4. I'm undecided. That one I like just finished yesterday, so I'm like, I don't know. But like overall so far, I would just give, out of personal preference, I would just give the like experience like a 5, because I've just had like so much fun and a great time listening to them. They really pulled me in. Just finished the 4th book, and I think the same narrator continues for the next 2, and she's by far my favorite narrator of all the narrators. I think she just sounds like more mature. I mean, Rose is a teenager, but there was like one narrator for the first book, and she was fine. She was cool, solid. I was cool with it. The second narrator for books 2 and 3, I didn't enjoy as much. It was a little more like whiny, like I'm gonna do what I want, kind of like thing. Not to be rude, I'm sure that's not like always her voice. She has other voices, but that was the vibe I got from the second narrator, and I did not enjoy it as much, but I got past it. This one I really like, and I think the like sense of humor and the sarcasm really comes across in like a less petulant way. And she does the accents, which I think they're good. I saw a lot of people were like, I hate her accents that she does, for like, because there's like a lot of like Russian people. I like the accents, okay? The second person didn't do the accents, and I felt like because there wasn't as much like variety, I sometimes had more trouble knowing who was talking. That's not an actual critique on the book, that's like the audio element. But anyways, I'm really enjoying them. They're really fun, and I'm just having a good time. So that was what I read like all this summer. Also, I reread None Shall Sleep just recently while I was in between the 3rd and 4th Vampire Academy books, which also I keep calling them the Vampire Diaries books. Not the same thing, but like I keep calling them that. And that was good. But I read that before, so I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm planning on making a like spooky season recommendations list, so that'll be like my next reading content video, I believe. Alright, thanks. Bye.